The finish is not what we wanted, but certainly the season in totality was an accomplishment for Iowa football. We're talking Hawkeyes as we do each and every Tuesday for the next hour. Please leave your comments and questions right here at Iowa Hawkeyes Live. And of course, it all works because we've got Corey Brada here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Corey, how you doing tonight?
Doing good, Mark. How are you on this fine Tuesday?
I'm good. I am good, and there is one more bowl game before the national championship game, and for two of us who love bowl season and find it very meaningful, of course, we're going to go deep into the Citrus Bowl recap and what went right, and most notably what went wrong. But what are your brief impressions on bowl season in terms of the success or lack thereof? Not of any particular conference, just overall bowl season and how it played out to you.
I love bowl season. I get tired of people talking about how bowls don't mean anything. Even I've seen some controversy. Was it Joel Klatt? And I mean, it seems like all these sports writers from the different networks get into it about just a variety of things, whether it be NIL or the transfer portal or the importance of bowl season or the lack thereof. I love bowl season, and we were just doing our post-game show for Iowa last night, and I told our listeners, I'm like, man, I feel like I haven't watched any college basketball for 2 weeks because I have been just focused on bowl season. So I love that. It's one of the things that I love about December because, as you may or may not know, I'm a huge anti-winter guy despite living in the heart of the Midwest. So if it wasn't for college football and college basketball, it'd be hard to continue to live in Iowa. But I've enjoyed it. I know you have brought up that you can't read too much into conference results. There's more to evaluate a conference than just a bowl season result. And we saw the Big Ten start really hot, kind of leveled off. We saw the SEC kind of do the opposite and then kind of climb back up. I think I don't know what the standings are, if you want to call them standings with bowl records, but certainly the SEC has a chance. If they win tonight, they're going to get a win on Monday.
And a loss.
Yeah, a loss. That's
and
true.
A loss on Monday.
If you want to consider it that, I guess. But the SEC certainly helped its cause with the dominant win over Michigan, which I took joy in. I understand that fans are going to get mad about that because they say, well, you should be rooting for the Big Ten Conference. There would have been reason for joy with either result, Mark.
Which you generally do, correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I came to the realization during the game or prior to the game, Mark, that it doesn't matter. Like, I think probably we all do this, but we feel guilty if we root for a certain team and we know it's not because it's like, oh, we have an impact on who wins. I mean, it doesn't matter who I root for at home. So I took some joy in it because it was a dominant performance. And I think I think it sort of quieted some Wolverine fans that got slightly swollen head. And that happens. That happens when you beat Ohio State for the first time in over a decade and you make the playoff for the first time. So kudos to a great season for Michigan, but I just as you know, I get tired of hearing the hype and it's going to be quiet for a little while. And by the way, we want to look forward, Mark. I know we're going to talk about the Citrus Bowl, but going to have a rematch of that Big Ten championship game early next year in Big Ten season. So that's going to be interesting. I know that the rosters will be a little different. Certainly the quarterback position at Michigan may be different, will likely be different. And I think the quarterback position at Iowa has a chance to be different, probably less of a chance than Michigan. And we can get into why. But as far as the Citrus Bowl is concerned, I told you before we went live, I wasn't tremendously surprised by what we saw in that game. Wan'Dale Robinson ended up being exactly what I feared he would be, an electric receiver that Iowa really couldn't match up with. It's frustrating to see the seniors go out that way. I know Riley's not returning because he did accept a invite to the Senior Bowl, so he'll be moving on. We got word, Mark, and this is something I didn't talk to you about prior. We got word 2 days ago that Jack Kerner, starting safety, is declaring, which I'm not totally surprised by that. A little bit disappointed. I think he could benefit from another year, but I'm not surprised anymore when kids leave early, regardless of draft stock. We saw Tyler Goodson declare early before the bowl game, opted out of the bowl, and I think he might get drafted, but it's not a lock at this point. Guys are just going to do that now. And about a year ago, when the NCAA allowed announced they would be allowing student athletes to stay for an extra year, I kind of assumed in my head, well, then that means Iowa's going to get everybody back. And then I realized, oh, wait, that's not how it works. And so we're starting to see that with guys like Kerner and guys like Moss. Not everybody's going to take advantage of that. And sometimes, as great as I would think it would be for these kids to be able to get an extra year in college, their clocks are ticking. They understand with football being the sport that it is, you only have a number of years to cash in those checks. And so I wish the best for Jack Kerner. I think he's probably got a good shot at getting drafted. He's undersized, but let's be honest, Iowa's had some safeties over the years that have made it who are undersized. Bob Sanders being the first one that comes to mind. Certainly Geno Stone is playing well right now for Baltimore. Amani Hooker wasn't quite as undersized as Kerner is, but they've had success stories at that position, no doubt about it. So I wish him the best. We're still waiting on decisions from guys like Linderbaum. I think it's many people feel like it's a foregone conclusion that he's leaving. I still want to hear it from his mouth or from his Twitter account, so to speak. And there's a few others as well. But overall, the Citrus Bowl was what I expected, and unfortunately, Iowa just couldn't get that last stop. We can talk about the decision to go for it on 4th and 1. I know Don and I talked about it on Saturday. You just watched the fourth quarter back. What were your thoughts?
Before we do continue with the Citrus Bowl, I'm just curious because you had made a comment about these NFL draft eligible players, Kerner and Goodson in particular. So you think those decisions have more to do with their own kind of taking inventory of the wear and tear versus either believing that they're going to be selected relatively high or that they're looking at their positional group and seeing some competition there? You think it has something, there's something else there?
Well, Kerner could be the competition issue because let's remember Iowa's bringing in Xavier Wampa, a 5-star safety. So, and he's enrolling early. So I could see him playing. That's why I don't think I like Jack Kerner. He's one of the best open field tacklers Iowa's had at that position. Really good, solid player for Iowa these last few years. But I could see that being an issue. I think Tyler Goodson's decision, I would just think, possibly weighing how the offensive line really didn't get much better throughout the year, that might have played a factor. But I think for a running back, especially, regardless of his draft stock, he may look at it and say, I don't see myself just physically being able to go up the draft boards much better than 5th or 6th round. And again, we know the short life of NFL backs. So I don't know what Riley Moss's decision was based off of. These guys are obviously getting feedback. They're having agents talk to them, which is probably not the feedback you want to listen to, but they're getting feedback from coaches and whatnot. So I don't know. As far as Riley is concerned, I mean, he came back. Matt Hankins is moving on. He's out of eligibility. I would think Riley would be a starter. The coaching staff seems to really like him, and I like him, but I do think they've got some good corners in waiting in Jamari Harris and Terry Roberts and a couple of guys that they grabbed in this recruiting class. But certainly Goodson, I would say, I just assume that, Mark, with running backs, that has to be a factor, especially for a guy who, again, is not real high on. He's not Breece Hall as far as an NFL talent. So I would think, and he had 1,100 yards. So he's probably looking at it and saying, what more can I do to improve my draft stock at this point?
And to your point, 256 carries, and that's with opting out of a bowl game. That's a lot of wear and tear. I would like to run the numbers to see where that ranks in college football. I got to think that's a top 10 or 12 number in college football in regards to rushing attempts. That's quite a few carries. Kerner, to your point about being a sure tackler, 88 tackles. That's quite a bit, third on the team.
Yeah. And again, I don't know where Kerner's. I haven't looked at his draft stock, but I would just think he's got a good shot of being drafted. Again, he's undersized. I get it. I don't know where he's going to test out at the combine, but just the Iowa's. It's kind of like Iowa tight ends. Like unless you're really not playing extensively at Iowa, you're probably going to get a late flyer. And I would say that about most defensive backs at Iowa. Most of them get a good shot. I mean, if you look at recent starters, I don't know the last starting corner who didn't at least get a reasonable shot and get drafted. I'm thinking certainly Hankins, I think, has a chance. Ojemudia is playing for the Broncos. Obviously, Desmond King, Josh Jackson. You can go down the list. So safety maybe not quite as prominent as corner. But again, they've had those success stories. So I wish him the best. And it helps Iowa, again, Anybody who wants to root against a guy, I see fans all the time who are upset by guys like Goodson leaving and opting out of the bowl game. You can believe that that's not the right decision if you want, but the bottom line is there's no reason to root against a guy like Tyler Goodson. Iowa needs a success story at running back. I've been saying that for years because they haven't had one since Sean Green. And that's one of the more, and again, we can probably talk about this sometime during the offseason. I know we're kind of entering the offseason now, but the fact that Iowa is known across the country for running the football, and we know that the numbers don't bear out that they're a dominant run team. But a big part of why we want to talk about zone blocking schemes and whatnot. Let's talk a little bit about the lack of star power at running back over the years. Again, if you throw out Sean Green, I know Mekhi Sargent is fighting for a roster spot. He's been on a few different rosters this year, has had a couple carries here and there. But I mean, you compare Iowa to a team like Wisconsin, who I know that, again, they have a different run scheme, but that should be a fair comparison, Mark, as far as development and recruiting. And it's just incredible when you think in the last decade and a half, Agumba Wale, Melvin Gordon, James White, Corey Clement. I mean, you can just go down that. Jonathan Taylor might be the best back in the NFL right now, Mark.
Monte Ball. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just incredible. And that's what Iowa's got. And you're hoping, I've got some hopes that this tandem they have coming in next year, Jazian Patterson and Caleb Johnson, one of those guys could be that tweener type back that could make it at the next level, because that will help recruiting. It is a snowball effect. So you wonder why Melvin Gordon picked Wisconsin over Iowa. I would have to think it's because he looked at it at the time and said they have more success at producing NFL backs. And again, possibly the scheme, the run scheme, the blocking scheme has something to do with it. Iowa needs a success story. So Tyler Goodson, if I'm going to root for anybody to succeed in the NFL in this entire class, I want all of them to do well, but certainly Tyler Goodson would be at the top of that list.
Hey, everyone, make it a point to head on over to From the Hawkeye of the Storm and subscribe to Corey's Iowa platform there, not just football, but of course basketball as well, as we are, I believe, in the heart of the Big Ten season. I don't keep track of such things anymore, but the Hawkeyes got off to an 0-2 start, correct, in the Big Ten?
Look at you. Look at Mark. Man alive. You need to be starting the voice. I was thinking about this. You need to, I don't want to spoil any ideas on here, but can you get somebody to start a voice of college basketball YouTube channel, Mark? And this thing needs to get big. Don't ask me to do it, but somebody needs to do it, and your name should be behind it. I know you're not the voice of college basketball, but you know what I'm saying. Make this a real amalgam, if you will. This needs to be a empire, if you will.
And you don't think college football is big enough?
No. You can always go bigger. You can always
with 25 channels, and we could still we haven't added the Purdue's of the world and Minnesota's.
That's right.
And
Mark, where are we at with Big Ten channels? I know
Big Ten channels. Yes.
Can you, off the top of your head, can you name all of them?
We're around 1,400 here with Iowa in regards to subs, if that's what you're asking about.
No, okay, I'm talking just
number of teams.
How many out of the 14 schools? How many channels do we have here?
Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin.
Wow.
6.
Okay, so we got room for growth there. So, I don't know if you're looking to grow, but boy, yeah, Purdue, Minnesota channel. You got some good content on the fellow from. I know our listeners really enjoyed hearing from him. What's the redheaded
Daniel?
Yeah, he is excellent.
Yeah,
I know he's busy. He covers the Vikings as well, but yeah, no. I don't know why we got on that tangent, but as far as it relates to Big Ten basketball, they did get it started off at 0-2, won last night, so now they're at 1-2. So they just resumed Big Ten season yesterday. Iowa did. So we're heading into, it kind of timed up well with the end of football season, because now fans can just, I'm not saying you forget football, but now fans can watch basketball and have something to root for. And Iowa's, they're 11-3, so you're certainly in the mix for a tournament spot, but you're going to have to win. I'd say you probably have to finish close to 500 in the Big Ten schedule, would be my guess for Iowa to make the tournament. Let's hope that happens.
What would be fun about launching a college basketball network would be, I would reserve the right. So first and foremost, I would have no hand in it. I don't watch college basketball. I'm removed from the sport. However, I did watch it fervently from, let's say, 1980 to 10 or 12, 15 years ago, something in that range. So I would reserve the right to crash any show at any point to talk about the mid 90s or any of that.
Yeah. So, what did you think of Tom Davis, Iowa basketball back in the 80s and 90s? Do you remember those teams, the
I
Roy
remember those
Marbles and
teams. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
B.J. Armstrong? And I mean, you
Sure.
can go down the list, Kenyon
Remember all
Murray.
those guys. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Kenyon Murray's son, again, I know you're totally detached from the sport now, but Kenyon Murray's son, Keegan, might be the best player in the Big Ten and one of the best in the country. I mean, he's certainly right there at the top of the Big Ten. Maybe Johnny Davis from Wisconsin would have a claim, and they're going to play each other on Thursday. So Iowa's had a lot of success. It's just a cool story with Kenyon, and we actually had Kenyon's high school coach call into our show last night, which was really cool to hear. So, yeah, it's been enjoyable. So I appreciate you giving a shout out to our channel. Definitely subscribe to From the Hawkeye of the Storm, because we'll be doing a live post game again Thursday following Iowa versus Wisconsin, which again, huge game up at the Kohl Center.
So Corey and I are going to dive into the Citrus Bowl for a few different reasons. Number one, even though everyone's always forward thinking, I just thought it was a great game, and I thought it was a showcase for what bowl play should be. And also, obviously, it shows us how Iowa, in its most recent matchup with a quality team, what I would consider to be a top 15 to 20 team in the nation, how it stacks up. And but I got to say, Corey, right out of the gate, folks are just fired up about the quarterback situation, the real Hayden, about the lack of interest in the portal, and then Hawkeye Howard is extremely strong here.
Hawkeye Howard, we love our friend down in Springfield, Missouri.
Wow,
he doesn't mince words. Now, I understand people who are tired of. First of all, people have been saying fire Brian Ferentz for several years now, to be completely honest. But I understand why some fans would say they're tired of the Kirk Ferentz era. I'm not going to say that, because I have lots of respect for Kirk Ferentz. They did just win 10 games and win the West outright. But people are tired of playing in the Citrus and the Outback Bowl. I mean, that's just, I don't think there's anything wrong with that comment that the real Hayden made at the beginning about how ridiculous it is that because I brought this up yesterday, and I'm not saying this is that I'm trademarking that statement, Mark, but I brought this up during our kind of a Hawkeye huddle, Hawkeye hangout is what I call it, over on the From the Hawkeye of the Storm channel. I think it's ridiculous that Iowa's never mentioned with any of these transfer portal quarterbacks. Like, regardless if Iowa's even contacting them, because that's just what I want. I just want to hear that Iowa's reaching out to somebody, acknowledging that this is what we need to do, or this is a possible solution. But they're not doing that. But the fact that these national writers, Mark, who again report on, and even if you want to call it speculation, like the report from the USC guy a few weeks ago, I can't remember his name, but reported that Keaton Slovis was being contacted by, Penn State, whatever it was, Penn State, Nebraska, Pittsburgh. I can't remember the three schools, but okay, that we heard that, and then we heard the schools that were reaching out to Bo Nix, Tyson Fumichan. I saw a writer for Rivals yesterday that, off the top of his head, named 4 or 5 schools potentially in the market for Caleb Williams. And I understand Caleb Williams is going to be a much sought after kid here for the next few weeks, but don't you think it's ridiculous? I mean, I know we just keep beating this dead horse, but the fact that we've established ourselves, Mark, the University of Iowa, the athletic department has established itself as not even a player. Like, people, it's not even that Iowa's not reaching out. It's that it's just assumed by the outside world, and rightfully so, it's assumed that Iowa is not going to take a quarterback, despite the fact they're one of the few Power 5 programs that desperately need one.
It is. It's curious. I'll say that. I'll be kind and say that, just because, the lack of production on the offensive side of the ball. We can dive into Spencer Petras' play in the Citrus Bowl, but the quarterback play is marginal at best. And we're seeing programs across the nation that stockpile that position, that aren't satisfied, and they've got pretty good players and production in the passing game, and they're still out there going after quarterbacks.
That's exactly my point. That's exactly my point. Like, and you brought up the fact that Iowa did just win the West. They've got one of the best defenses in the country, one of the best special teams units in the country. It's going to be the same next year. And yet, it's not even like it's a possibility. And when you bring it up, like if somebody, I've read through comments and threads about somebody, fans bring it up. Well, what about Iowa? People laugh at it. It's almost humorous to even think that Kirk Ferentz would do this. And I love Kirk, and he's stuck in his ways, but that's a problem, I think. I just think it's a problem. Now, let's get back to the Citrus Bowl. Quarterback play in the Citrus Bowl. You and I both talked about this heading into the game. You asked me about who's going to start because that was sort of a clickbait topic with Iowa media heading into the game. And I didn't mean to just laugh off the question, but I thought it was totally ridiculous that we were even having to discuss it and that people were falling for that debate. I told you the whole time it was going to be Spencer Petras. There was no question about it in my mind, and I don't think there was any question about it in Kirk's mind or the offensive staff's mind. We saw Spencer Petras start, never once left the field, Mark. Iowa did he have 3 points at halftime? I'd have to look back at the halftime score, but
Yeah,
Iowa
3.
had 3 points at halftime, and we didn't see a change. Now, they did score some points. I give the running game most of the credit there. I thought the Williams, they're not brothers, but I almost want to call them brothers because, man, they run very similarly. LaShawn, I think, has a little bit of a burst that maybe Gavin doesn't have, but I think the running back room is in good shape. Again, you add a couple nice recruits next year. But the running game was good. Certainly, it looked like the offensive line improved during bowl prep, which isn't surprising. I know something we haven't mentioned is Hunter Norzad, the O-line transfer out of Cornell, released his top 5 yesterday. Iowa is included there with Virginia Tech, Penn State. I'm going to forget the other ones. Virginia Tech, Penn State, Illinois, and Auburn. So those are the other 4. But my point is the offensive line looked good against Kentucky, and you potentially add a guy like Hunter Norzad. Again, I'm not concerned about the offensive line. It sounds like David Davidkov is healthy now. He was a 4-star kid that came in last year. They've got personnel there to fill any gaps and for competition's sake. Again, we know the guys who are leaving. We suspect guys like Linderbaum are leaving. So yeah, I continue to say it. And the bowl, to me, the Citrus Bowl just affirmed this in my mind. The biggest position of need right now on this team is quarterback. And I said it to Don, and I know we've had people comment in the chat in past shows. I will not be surprised at all, Mark, if Alex Padilla transfers. In fact, I'll be a bit surprised if he doesn't. Because how would you feel if you were here in early 2020, and for one of the first times maybe the first time in Kirk Ferentz's head coaching tenure at Iowa, he announced the starter, basically endorsed the starter in January, which to me would already be a shot to my confidence, regardless of how young you are. You want to feel like if I really work my tail off and I perform well, I got a shot. And that kind of just shoots you. It shoots your confidence. And so, of course, he plays 2020, doesn't play well. We come into 2021. They compete in spring. They compete throughout fall camp. There's never a question that it's Spencer. Spencer doesn't play well most of the season, basically the entire season. Alex is inserted, plays just as well as Spencer, maybe even a little bit better if you look at his mobility. And what does Kirk do? But he continues to suggest that the only reason Alex is playing is because Spencer's banged up. And that happened game after game after game. And, then you have a bowl prep. And you would think the coaches are going to look at these quarterbacks' performances throughout the season and kind of reevaluate where they are and where do we see our future at quarterback. And we're going to play that. You would think they'd play that guy with the higher upside in the bowl game. And not only did they not start Alex, they didn't give him a snap. So at some point, I won't be upset at all if Alex Padilla, I'll be upset at the fact that they're losing him, but I don't blame Alex Padilla for leaving. And that is the day and age we live in. The bad thing about it, Mark, is with so many quarterbacks in the portal, you wonder, can he find a home where he can start at the Power 5 level? I think that's a huge question mark, unfortunately. But I think he's got the upside to be able to compete for a job. And certainly, given the quarterback status here, I just think it's a shame that he was not rewarded for what he showed on the field during the regular season. And by rewarded, I mean get some time to prove himself in the bowl game.
So Kirk seems to be possibly getting to a situation where he's going to box himself into a corner by holding true to two of his tenets, and they're admirable to a certain extent, but he's loyal apparently to Spencer Petras. Number one, number two, he's anti-transfer portal. When I say anti, that might be a little bit strong, but I understand the reluctance, and I understand not wanting to change with the times and not liking where the times are going. But
It
no
doesn't
one
matter.
man,
You have
yeah,
no control
yes,
over the times.
you have to play. You're going to put yourself in your program in a bad situation if you don't change with the times, and to align yourself with one quarterback who is clearly not the bad choice of words, but clearly not the better player, where there should be competition between the two. Um, that you're driving Padilla
Yeah.
away. And the points that you make seem to make total sense to me, that you're driving one of the two players away to align with a quarterback who's not proven to be a solid Power 5 quarterback, and then you're not going into the transfer portal to back yourself up to where you have another
Right.
option. They could be in a really bad spot
Well, we
next season.
already lost Deuce. I mean, Deuce is gone.
Yeah.
So, and he ain't coming back. Like, I know I haven't heard anything about potential schools. That didn't end well. At least it didn't appear to end well from the outside. And can we put up this comment from Eric B, Mark, this comment at 506? Because this is a perfect example. We continue to talk about the quarterback position, and 2 or 3 weeks ago, the response may have been, and I heard it from some fans, a defending of Spencer Petras, saying, well, the line's not good enough. He's not getting time. Yes, he's not mobile, but for him to be successful, he needs time, so we need to improve the line. This, Eric, it kind of sums up what I've heard from most fans these past couple of weeks, especially since this bowl game, as the line has improved. And it didn't look good against Michigan. I'll acknowledge that, but it looked pretty good against Kentucky. And I don't remember pass protection being a real issue. I know they got home on that last interception, but I think that one was on Petras. To be completely honest, we watched that playback. But the fact of the matter is, it didn't really do anything. Like, you exactly what Eric said. You're still missing open receivers, and again, it's not a shot to Petras. I know the columnist for the Des Moines Register came out with a story this week because Spencer brought up after the game how his mom has been subjected to having to read abusive tweets about Spencer, and that's not fair to his mom. And I agree with that. But Mark, a couple things I'd say in response to that. A, get off Twitter. If it's that toxic for you as the mother of a student athlete, just get off. It's not worth it. And B, shame on the people who are doing that. If I'm criticizing Spencer Petras, I'm not taking a personal shot at him or his character. I have no doubt he's a great human being. He's going to be very, very successful in life. But we're talking about who's the best person qualified to operate this offense. Perfect example, Drew Tate wasn't the most likable guy, I would say, in the locker room, but the dude was a gamer. And of course, the Citrus Bowl 2005 was a perfect example of that. So the fact of the matter is, regardless of who is more likable off the field, don't try telling me that there's this huge gap between Alex Padilla and Spencer Petras. That's ridiculous. And so I think it's sad that Alex Padilla didn't get even a chance in that bowl game to show what he's made of. And again, every time he was given a chance, his confidence was shot because we're, like you said, Mark, we're trying to preserve confidence in Spencer Petras. We're trying to be loyal to Spencer by saying that, whoa, we're not starting Alex for any reason other than the fact that Spencer's hurt. Just imagine how you would feel as a backup quarterback when you work your tail off, and every time you do, the head coach comes out and says that. I just think it's sad. I don't think Kirk Ferentz means to take a shot at Alex Padilla, but there is such a thing of being loyal to a fault, and I think it could end up with Alex transferring.
Yeah, these positions are to be earned, and they're supposed to be competition. That seems to be something that most coaches lean on in talking about spring ball into August camp is competition breeds excellence. It makes players better to not know, okay, I got this spot. I'm going to put in my time, but I don't really need to develop or get any better. I've won the job. It's mine.
Mark, and this may have been may have been misspoken by Spencer, but before the Big Ten championship game, a reporter asked Spencer about quarterback competition, how the competition was going. And Spencer basically said back, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the quote in front of me, but he basically said, "We're not competing for spots this late in the season." That is a shocking statement. That should lay people out, Mark. That is so. And again, I'm going to give him and the program the benefit of the doubt that is just simply a miss.
Hopefully we get Corey back here in a second. I think he'll realize in just a second. There we go. We
I'm
got
back,
you, Corey.
I don't know what you missed of my little spiel there, but
We
if
only missed about 10 seconds, if that.
if that statement from Petrus is true, and I again I want to give him the benefit of the doubt that it's not, and it was just misspoken on his part. But if that were somehow true, then there are serious issues with how we evaluate quarterbacks and maybe positions in general. If these players aren't competing for spots throughout the season, I mean, your job is never safe, and that's what should. I mean, these kids, especially at quarterback, you're not trying to be better than the guy behind you. You're trying to be the best version of yourself. And if that's good enough to start, then you deserve to start. It shouldn't matter what point in the season we're in. And certainly with the struggles at quarterback, you would think it would be the opposite, that we would make it even more of a competition in December. So that was a troubling statement from Spencer earlier last month.
I'm going to throw out a wild theory that I don't believe to be true, but it's gone through my mind at some point in the last 5 minutes. So the level of quarterback play in college football has been raised significantly. These guys, especially in the last 10 to 15 years, number one, just the amount of throws in the game versus what the average team attempted just makes you a better quarterback by and large, makes the pool of quarterbacks better because they're throwing 30 and 35 and 50 times a game versus throwing 20 and 25 times a game. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we all know that teams are throwing the ball more than they were 15 years ago, number one. Number two, they're being prepared at a much higher rate earlier in their careers, as far back as junior high, but certainly into the high school ranks with all the camps and everything that goes on. The level of play, the level of skill throwing and catching the football in today's game is ridiculous. Okay. I'm just throwing this out as maybe Kirk, locked in his cocoon, analyzes and evaluates his quarterbacks as though it was 20 years ago and doesn't really recognize what's out there and what's being executed elsewhere.
Well, again, I mean, I don't know what mirror we have to bring into that facility, but we're not living in 1999 anymore. We're not living in 2002 anymore, and it's changed a lot since then. It's changed a lot in the last couple of years, but it's changed a lot since then. And the other thing I would say, when you look at how Kirk likes to operate, his, if you want to call it stubbornness, but his old school personality as it relates to basically everything in that program has, for the most part, worked, and it continues to work. I mean, they did just win 10 games. And so it doesn't mean you have to change how you operate completely. But certainly one large aspect of it, the offense and evaluating offensive talent and recruiting offensive talent and utilizing the portal for offensive talent, that does need to change. And that's my opinion. You may argue that. I think the results are pretty clear. But you're right. It's unfortunate, if you want to call it a cocoon. I hope that spring comes early and that butterfly hatches, Mark, because we need something. We need something bold and beautiful to kind of tamper down there's some animosity in the fan base right now with 10 wins, which is sad, but I understand it because, again, you can win 10 games and get to the West Championship. There are always going to be people that say that's not enough. We got to win a title, got to make the playoff. That's just the day and age we live in. And I think Iowa, it's also it's ultra frustrating because, again, we go back to those units, the defense and special teams, which are championship ready right now, Mark.
Most of the comments and the questions that are running through my mind, as is typically the case, are things that we can table for the rest of the off season, because I want to make sure that we're kind of in order in regards to the topics that we're taking on. But I do have a lot of questions for you over the next several weeks and months. In terms of the Citrus Bowl, okay, again, I'll make the statement real quick that I just thought it was a great showcase for second tier bowl games, of having two really good teams out there that didn't win their conference, aren't the echelon of team that was disappointed in not getting to the playoff and playing in the Rose Bowl, or you know who I'm talking about there, or some other teams, but two just really good teams, laying it all out on the line. You know, it went through my mind, similar to what we saw in the Sugar Bowl with Ole Miss quarterback Matt Corral. It was late in the game that Tyler Linderbaum was, I believe, taken out of the game for a play. Turned out to be that he was okay, and I think he came back in, but I just thought, my goodness.
He came back in. Somebody asked me, why would you come back in? Dude's insane. He's a big Hawkeye. I love the guy. I mean, he's just a great. Now, you may say he's endangering his draft stock. I don't think he would have went in had there been any doubt that he was going to be okay.
Yeah.
But that just shows what kind of person he is. And I know Kyler Schott slid over to center. That center is a question mark, because heck, with that injury, I expected Matt Fagan, who had been listed as the backup center all year, to come in for Tyler, and it was Kyler Schott who slid over. So that makes me wonder, do they not have confidence in a backup center right now? So that would be another big question mark on that line. The 4th down and 1 mark, you know, I said after the game, I wanted them to go for it. My first inclination was punt, because the defense is playing well enough.
Sure.
You don't want to give Kentucky a short field. I get it. But then I reflected on my own words that you and I had discussed, as far as just that changing mindset, wanting to change the mindset to being aggressive and go take the game, go win it, as opposed to trying not to lose. And so I was hoping they would go for it. When they lined up for it, I thought, okay, they're going. But there's a couple things that went wrong there. A, they didn't snap it, which you can argue was still the right decision to punt. But you do not take a timeout in that situation. And you probably noticed it, and Coach Patterson brought it up right away. That's just inexcusable to use a timeout in that situation. It's the same story. It's putting all your chips, all your hopes, all your chips on the defense, because if we don't have we're not conserving timeouts. We're not doing anything to plan around us needing a last-minute drive. And you just take a penalty, and you would be in the same position. They had a touchback on the punt anyways.
Yeah, so everything you just covered points to why that was the wrong decision. So first and foremost, they were around their own 40, correct?
Yeah, and they're one of the best punters in the country.
One of the best punters in the country. If I'm going to quote Corey Bratta from earlier shows, the best punter in the country.
There's a lot of good punters out there, Mark. There are a lot of good punters out there.
There are. That position as well has been upgraded considerably in college football in the last 10 years. So my first thought is that, you know, I'm typically working the percentages, and I don't want to say I'm anywhere close to Don Patterson's level when it comes to that by any stretch, but that's kind of my first line of thinking. Okay, they're at their own 40. What type of game is this? Who do you lay your confidence in? The offense, defense, their offense, their defense, all those things. And we're talking about there is a somewhat of a difference, a percentage difference between, let's say, if it's 4th and a half yard versus being like 4th and 2. It's just a different play. So they were around 4th and 1.5, something in that range. Correct?
No, it was less than 1. It was 4th and about 2 feet.
Was it that short?
Yes, it was.
Okay. All right. That's a 85% certainty of gaining the first down. I would say something in that range. So I think and even if you don't get it, no, that's potentially a game deciding mistake, but it's not guaranteed. You've got
they needed a touchdown, Mark.
Yeah, they needed a touchdown. You've got a really good defense. They've got a decent offense. It's not prolific. You haven't lost the game, but you can, with about 6 minutes left. How much time was left?
No, there was just under 4.
That's right. They were in the 3:40 range. you're going to not ice the game, but man, you take a major step toward icing the game, considering all those other factors. And to your point, once they decided, now I'm going to steal your line here about putting all the eggs in one basket, how much it's worth trying to get the defense to jump off sides. It happens enough where the attempt, I don't have an issue with the attempt, but that probably happens 15 or 20% of the time. It usually doesn't work, but it works enough to give it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
But if it doesn't work, you can't waste the timeout with 3.5 to 4 minutes left, because you don't know if they're going to score with 45 seconds left in the game and you need a timeout, but still have time to get it done. And then number two, with a punter, why not give him the full field and let him just sail that thing?
Well, and the other thing is too, I'm not saying this would have been the best decision, but if you're going to call a timeout there, then go for it. So if you're going to use the whole clock to try to draw them off sides, fine, and then you're going to call a timeout, but you better darn well go for it on 4th and 1. It makes no sense to call a timeout and then punt. You could even argue, try to draw them off sides and then go for it with a second or two left on the play clock. But the bottom line is Kirk Ferentz had no intention of going for it on that play. So, as far as changing mind, there was no, we've been talking ever since the Michigan game about how Iowa needs a different mindset offensively. They had about a month to, conject and figure out what the mindset was going to be, if there was going to be a changed mindset. And a month's not a long time, but it gives you an indication of where does Iowa believe it is offensively. There was no change in mindset on that. That's the same thing. And I saw Hayden made the comment too in the chat. Clock management issues. I'm going to be hitting that really hard this offseason, Mark, because we talk about quarterback and we can talk about play calling. The clock management issues at Iowa are almost they might be the most disconcerting thing behind the lack of acknowledgement of our quarterback issues, because it's every game. It is every single game. I'll give you a perfect example, and I brought it up during the postgame show. And I know you watched part of the game. You watched all the fourth quarterback today, but you go to the end of the first half. I'm trying to recall this to my brain here, but Kentucky had 1st and 10 at the 11. All right. Clock was moving. Okay. Clock was moving with about 1:50 to go. That's when they moved the chains to the 11. Now, Iowa, I believe, had at least 2 timeouts. Maybe had 3, but I think I had 2. No, I believe maybe they did have 3. Regardless, in that situation, you call a timeout. You call a timeout because Kentucky is no longer concerned about the clock. You know that, Mark. They're no longer concerned about the clock. The entire playbook is open. Now, could they potentially get a first down at the 1 and then need 4 downs? It's possible, but is it probable? Absolutely not. So just logic, basic clock management logic tells you take the timeout, you burn your timeouts, because regardless if they get a touchdown or they don't, there's no reason not to use your timeouts in that situation to conserve time for you. And what did they do instead? They let the clock run all the way down, and then Kentucky scored, as we knew they would, and then Iowa got the ball back with about 35 seconds in the first half. I mean, that is just it's just inexcusable. There is no rhyme or reason for that. So I understand maybe I think it's clearer the coaching staff doesn't think in terms of clock management. But I think it is Kirk's responsibility this offseason to take a good long look at that and say, okay, how can we fix that? We've got to put somebody in charge of clock management, whether it be LeVar Woods or it's Ken O'Keefe. Somebody needs to be their job, and no one else's. No, there should be no one else. And I know that's a perfect example. Don Patterson was considered an expert, and I believe it was. And I'll have to have him remind me of this. I believe it was at Buffalo. I can't remember. Who was the Buffalo head coach 2 cycles ago? Do you remember?
Maybe
Mark?
Doug Marrone, or
after him? Is it after
Doug
him?
Marrone, it would have been.
We're talking about Buffalo Bulls, right?
Oh, I thought you were going to the NFL.
I'm talking about Buffalo U.
Oh, are we going
Doug
with
Marrone? Was he with the Bulls?
Lance Leopold?
I think it was the guy after him.
Or We were
Diaco.
going to
Wasn't Diaco?
Turner
No, that was at
Gill.
UConn. He was at
Turner
UConn,
Gill.
wasn't he? Where was Diaco? Was he at UConn or was he at
Diaco was at UConn. Bob
Okay. So I'm
Diaco.
thinking of Diaco at
Okay.
UConn
Okay.
and Don telling me the story about Diaco. And Diaco, I believe it was
Okay.
Diaco that put Don in charge of clock management. He said in a staff meeting, he said, Don is in charge of clock management. Ain't nobody else going to be questioning him. This is his job. Because he knew Don knew what he was doing. And clock management, although we make it out to be simple, Don's talked about it, it's a very
Sure.
complex thing. There are a lot of just as far as mathematics and just situational things that you need to understand. So it is a project, but it doesn't seem like we have much of an understanding of how to manage the clock. And it happens almost on a game by game basis. And then decisions. We bring up the Purdue game. You're near midfield, and I think they took a knee heading into halftime at midfield. I mean, what are we doing? What are we not going to even take a shot? It just doesn't make any sense. So again, I want to really focus on that this offseason. But that was another thing. And I know it sounds like we're just hitting the same things, but Mark, these things came up in the Citrus Bowl. The same things we've been talking about since the Michigan game reared their ugly heads in this game, unfortunately.
They absolutely did. And the one, well, as I'm playing along with the clock management during any game, the one difficulty that I find above any else is the determination, and this almost changes play by play within that last minute to 90 seconds of a first half in particular. Obviously, if it's the game, then you either win or lose. Unless it's a tie game, then you got to determine the success of your offense versus giving the ball back. But exactly that, trying to determine, okay, are we conserving time for our offense and the success of this drive? And then at what point, okay, now it's 2nd and 16, are we then determining it's going to be difficult for us to succeed and we no longer want to conserve time? Just making that judgment is to me the most difficult as I've played along through the years.
And you're right. So it's not always a cut and dry situation. Unfortunately, what I struggle with Iowa is Iowa has a problems with the cut and dry situations. So it's not the complex issues or the complex situations. It's the easy ones, the ones that should be obvious, that are obvious to the common fan. And so, again, that's a concern. I will say this, a perfect example of willingness to change. Last night in the Iowa-Maryland game, we observed Iowa up by 3. Jordan Bohannon missed the the back end of a two-shot trip to the line. So he missed the second free throw. And Fran McCaffrey instructed Tony Perkins to foul up by 3. Now there was like 5 or 6 seconds left, but as you probably know, Mark, that's been sort of a debate, if you want to call it that. Coaches have different philosophies about, do you foul up 3 or do you just play it out and defend the 3-pointer? And for as long as I can remember it, Fran has played it out. And last night we saw him foul up 3 and they won the game. It's a perfect example, and people can say what they want about Fran McCaffrey. He loses his cool at times. He's maybe not as warm and fuzzy as Kirk Ferentz, but I give him a big, major attaboy because that was a change in philosophy. And again, I think it's the right change in philosophy. And so again, you can change things and not lose who you are. So maybe Coach Ferentz could take a little bit of something out of the book of Fran McCaffrey from last night.
I am far from a basketball expert, but what used to drive me nuts would be the 2-point deficit for the team that has the ball, game-winning type situation or game-tying type situation, and the point guard invariably, most of the time, waits too long to start the play, gets into trouble, doesn't, waits till 7-8 seconds, and he's still somewhere halfway between the top of the key and half court. So this is what I would typically find. They start the play too late and he dribbles around and then he settles for a jump shot. When you go to the rim and you force the defense to make a play, you force the officials to make a call, that's typically the way to go, is to go to the basket.
Yeah, and the chances when, especially with just the rules and rules on verticality and whatnot. Now there are going to be sometimes that those calls are missed, but yeah, your chances of getting to the line and your chances of being able to put the ball in the basket are much higher. So now you're right, and again, there are coaches that feel different ways. I mean, I'm frustrated with some things Fran does, but again, going back to that situation specifically, I'm proud of him doing that. So maybe Kirk will do that. You know, I don't know. It wasn't that long ago, Mark, that maybe you don't remember this, but people were calling Kirk Ferentz in like 2017, 18. They were calling him New Kirk. Do you remember that?
I
Everybody was
don't.
calling him. Everybody's calling him New Kirk because he started to go for it on fourth down more, and he started to run some trick plays on special teams. Well, a couple things. The trick plays have gone bye bye. They don't run trick plays anymore. It's funny. Riley Moss made a comment during bowl prep that, man, it's really annoying. It's really irritating because the offense has been hitting us on some trick plays during bowl prep, and all the Iowa media gets all excited about it and has to be on Twitter, first and foremost. And then of course we go to the game and not a single trick play. Now I know Don kind of put me in my place. He said, well, the reverse to Arlen Bruce for a touchdown was technically what we'd consider a trick play, but I guess again. That's a play that Iowa has ran. I don't consider it a trick play. I'll take Don's word for it that it is. But it's just, again, I go back to the word conjecture. It's just a lot of talk and hype. It's just like who's going to start. And Kirk Ferentz said a couple days before the game, well, you'll find out who's starting at 1 Eastern on Saturday. And again, ooh, what a clever Kirk. It's like, come on, man. What are we doing? It's just a lot of talk. And so you hope that it gets to the drawing boards this offseason. And Mark, I know we're running out of time here, and maybe fans are going to tune off when I bring this up, but can we at least address the status of the transfer portal at quarterback again? Because every week we talk about it, but it has changed once again. I said about a month ago that I was guessing that most of these quarterbacks would be gobbled up by January 1st, and that has not been the case. Some of them have been, but there are still a lot who are out there. You've got a West Virginia channel. I know there's been a lot of controversy about Daggy and fans that didn't want him to be the starter at West Virginia, but he was a starter at Power 5 level. Is that a kid that, if you're Iowa, you should even look at this point? Would he be an upgrade? Let me ask you that. Would he be an upgrade from what Iowa currently has?
I don't think so.
Okay,
I think I think he would battle for the job. I think he's in that class.
Right. But it's just these people who say, well, he's not very good. Well, have you seen Iowa's quarterback room? And so the kid from Marshall, if you know who I'm talking about,
I
Grant
bet I'll know the
Wells.
name as soon as you say it. Yeah.
Grant Wells.
I have no evaluation on him.
Yeah, some of these, but see, again, you could say, well, why would we be targeting a kid from Marshall? Iowa's more apt to go after a kid from a Marshall than they are. And that doesn't make sense to me, but they're more apt to do that because they believe they could have a chance at landing him, as opposed to someone at the Power 5 level. Caleb Williams, give me the percentage chance that Caleb Williams would consider, say Bob Stoops, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but say Bob Stoops called up Caleb Williams and he said, hey, Caleb, I want to give my endorsement to the University of Iowa. Here's Kirk Ferentz's number. He's going to be calling you here. Would Caleb Williams, what would be the percentage chance of him considering it?
Okay. Caleb Williams has been very upfront about his number one priority is being developed for the NFL.
Right.
I also got to think that
that's not happening at Iowa.
It's not happening at Iowa. Also, I just got to think that somebody would put it in his ear, watch the Iowa offense. Just watch just watch some games from last year.
Can you just give me a minute to lie to? Can you just give me a minute to lie to myself, Mark? That Iowa has a chance at
Caleb Williams is a bit out of reach.
Yeah.
The other thing with that type of quarterback, and you've made this point in the past, I believe, is that they want to see a style offense that is going to cater to their skills. When is the last time Iowa, even when there was a mobile quarterback, they still ran the same offense? They didn't run it for a running style quarterback.
No. But, guys like Brad Banks succeeded.
Sure.
I mean, you can't argue. I mean, he's the one example, but it did work in the Iowa system. So there's one guy you could point to. I know the game has changed a bit, but man, he was tremendous. Were you a big Brad Banks fan? What did you think about him back in
Oh,
2000?
I knew he wouldn't play in the NFL, but yeah, I thought he was a gamer. I thought he was, yeah, a tremendous leader and, dynamic
Do you think he deserved to be
quarterback.
in the Heisman consideration that
Sure.
year?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
okay, so Daggy, the kid from Marshall, Grant Wells, I think I looked up his numbers. So he had a 66.4 completion percentage in 21, 8.0 yards per attempt, 140 passer rating. Jarrett Dagey, if anybody wants to know, 65.2% completion percentage, 7.3 yards per attempt, 136 passer rating. All those numbers are better than either guy at Iowa. So I'm just saying I'm not trying to lobby for any of these guys, but it's going to be hard to find a starter at the Power 5 level who would not be an upgrade from Iowa's quarterback room right now. That's all I'm saying. And you're right, system is important. The biggest issue is will Iowa even consider going after any of these kids? And that's the biggest. It continues to be the biggest question.
It would be interesting to see what Wells did in the bowl game since it was BYU's defense, and they won that game. And then also any other Power 5 opponent that Marshall, I'm trying to think who they played in the non-conference schedule, how well he did in that game. I'm sure they played a Power 5, but I can't remember what game that would be.
Tell all the fans about, because I know nothing about him, the kid from Ole Miss that just entered the portal, the quarterback / wide receiver. Is it what was his name? John Rice. He's got 3 names.
Oh,
right?
John Rice Plumlee. I was not aware that.
Yeah,
I
he
was
just
not
entered the
aware that
portal
he
today.
entered the portal. Okay.
Yes, he did. So should he be on the radar? He doesn't have much he's been used at receiver a lot, hasn't he?
Yes. So, yeah, quarterback who was supposed to be the next one in line, and yeah, a running quarterback who can certainly throw it. I've seen him play quite a bit at quarterback, and he's a really good player. But again, he's a different type player than what Iowa's had there. But he was good enough. He was good enough as a wide receiver that they flipped him from quarterback to play wide receiver just for the bowl game against Indiana last year. And he caught like 7 or 8 passes. He caught the key pass that led to the game-winning score. And then he wasn't good enough to even step on the field this year at wide receiver. They were that stacked at wide receiver, but he stepped in just as a slot receiver against Indiana and had a tremendous game.
So I guess my question would be, is he a guy? Because again, Iowa has been in the portal. I think they recruited Isaiah Nayer. I think going by basically, the Tyler Barnes and who he's following on Twitter, and he was following Isaiah Nayer, which would make me think they were at least somewhat interested in Nayer from Wyoming. I don't know where he committed, some big school, but I think wide receiver is probably a position they would consider taking a transfer at. They took Matt Quarles from New Mexico a couple of years ago, so they've shown the willingness to do that. They took Charlie Jones from Buffalo, although he was not even on scholarship at the time. But I guess my point is, would this kid from Ole Miss even consider, how highly touted do you believe he'll be?
He's not played a whole lot of quarterback. He's played some, and he's played against good teams.
But bring him in. If I'm Iowa, if you're looking for a wide receiver and he's got a history at quarterback, bring him in. Let's see what he can do this spring. See where see where he fits. If he doesn't fit at quarterback, let's play him a wide receiver. Now, again, it's assuming he wants to come here, which is doubtful.
So your call on either Plumlee versus Daggy would be Daggy is more of the sure thing. Plumlee is more of a dynamic athlete.
Right.
It could possibly be better.
Yeah. So, and I saw Jack Bob brought up that Adam Cox started following Caleb Williams. So Adam Cox is a grad assistant, I believe, former Iowa fullback on the Iowa staff. So if that's the case, then that's going to get Iowa fans at least somewhat interested in the recruitment of Caleb Williams. But I agree. I don't think it's conceivable. And I think he could go just about anywhere, couldn't he?
I don't think John Rice Plumlee's your guy. Not at Iowa. Yeah,
Well,
I don't think he's good enough, number one, nor number two, is he the style quarterback. Can you see an Iowa quarterback? I just pulled up his numbers because I knew as a freshman he ran like crazy.
Yeah.
He ran for 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns as a quarterback.
I saw that yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we need something different, but I agree. I was not going to try. So to end our show, Mark, you said about a month ago that you were going to find Iowa fans a quarterback. So
Yeah.
tell me, you know, you have a good feel for, as do I, unfortunately, but you got a good feel for which quarterbacks are still out there in the portal. First of all, what were your thoughts about Gabriel flipping to Oklahoma?
Yeah, it's crazy. You wonder if these guys are talking to each other. That was the first notion I had because it seemed to be orchestrated.
Oh, absolutely. They've got to be, right? I mean, that's not a there's no violation even. I mean, not that people are concerned about violations anymore, but that's not a violation, two student athletes calling each other up and talking.
Yeah,
I will say this,
2 or 3.
there are a lot of quarterbacks still out there, more than I thought there would be, again, a month this time. So who at this point would you
Oh
still say
boy,
Calzada? I
I
haven't heard anything
forgot.
about
I
Calzada.
I forgot I said that because
Yeah,
I
you
do
said
need to
that.
find you a quarterback.
I just don't
Uh,
know. I've not heard a darn thing about Calzada. I heard he was committing to Pitt, then Slovis committed to Pitt, and since then
sure.
I've heard nothing.
You know, he would be my guy thus far. Out of
Okay.
these 3 or 4, he would probably win the job, but he wouldn't be a slam dunk winner over Padilla and Petrus.
Jack Bob, he says, what are the chances Iowa takes a QB? The chances are 10%. So 90% chance they don't, Mark. That would be what I mean. Mark, they haven't done. Again, we've had a month go by. Wouldn't you think they would have done it by now?
They
There'd be
should have
some.
looked at Adrian Martinez.
Well, they didn't. Not that I couldn't validate that claim that they were at least.
Keaton Slovis would have been a more accurate Spencer Petras.
Yeah, but see, now he's going to a place where they did develop a guy who's going to be a first-round draft pick at quarterback, and it makes sense. So, I see Joey just made a comment. Connor Bazelak from
Oh,
Missouri.
yeah.
Iowa did
There you go.
recruit him. Iowa recruited, and they offered him, Mark. They offered Bazelak and Calzada. So those would be two guys that would be obvious to look at. But I just don't have any reason to think they are. Keep talking about it. We just keep slam dunking it in our own faces, but it just doesn't change. Now maybe maybe both these guys, maybe they're being recruited by Iowa and Iowa's somehow keeping them quiet, but I don't think I don't think there is much of a chance of that happening. Unfortunately,
We're going to end this show on a positive note in a strange sort of way, in that I want your thoughts on the play call that gave Iowa the lead. I saw some ingenuity and the play call that Brian called that got Sam Laporta the ball, where he threw the block and kind of faked out and got lost on the other side of the field and caught it and ran for the game
the
leading
screen,
touchdown.
the
Yeah, the
screen, right?
screenplay. It was a decent call. It was a nice call
Yeah, it
in
was.
the moment.
I said after the game, I thought Brian called a good game. I mean, there were some moments that, again, I don't understand, but I also have to realize, like the 4th and 1, that's Kirk. That's Kirk saying
Yeah.
we're punting here. So I will say this, that the call to Laporta, we had ran some screens to our backs. For some reason, those weren't used against Michigan, which didn't make any sense because I remember Coach Patterson bringing this up to me ahead of that Big Ten championship game. The one thing that you could argue Michigan was susceptible to were screenplays. And Iowa didn't run one until the 3rd quarter of that game when they were down 3 scores. So that made no sense. You could argue that Kentucky was somewhat susceptible to them as well, and they waited a while to run one against Kentucky. But they did work. Laporta, Jack, I see Jack's comment that Laporta is headed to the NFL. He is not. He is coming back. So I guess I can't say it with 100% certainty, but 99% certain. Again, just from what I've been told, and I wouldn't normally say that, but this is going back to my conversation with Tom Kakert. He is very, very confident he's coming back, and I trust Tom and his sources. So that's good news. I'm assuming something doesn't change, and they could always change. That's why I don't say 100%. But yeah, you're right. That was a good play call. And Mark, let's just give a shout out to these backs. I know we brought them up earlier, but were you impressed with what we saw from Gavin and LaShawn Williams?
Yes.
And Ivory
Yeah,
Kelly Martin's not coming back. So it'll be those two guys plus maybe Devin Hilson from Des Moines North, and then Patterson and not Don, Jazzian. Jazzian Patterson and Caleb Johnson coming in next year. So I think the running back room is fine.
I think the two running backs and the offensive line complemented each other extremely well. They were given lanes to run, to work with, but then they were also dodging some guys and dragging tacklers for extra yardage.
Boy,
I thought it was really good.
They both know how to lower their shoulders, and that's something Tyler Goodson just really never was able to do. He just didn't have the size, kind of like Akram Wadley. But boy, LaShawn to me has got a good burst, and he trucked a guy. I don't know what point in the game it was, but it was a fun highlight to go back and watch to get an extra couple of yards. So they're going to be fun to watch for the next few years.
I'm also going to give kudos to both of us because I think it was on this platform in this show just last week that I said this game has 20-17 written all over it. And you were of the same mindset. So
my prediction heading into the game was 24-20 Iowa. So had Iowa went down and scored the touchdown, I would have nailed it. But you did as well. It was kind of what you expected. But in the end, I think the difference you'd have to admit was Wan'Dale Robinson. I mean, it just, again, you can look at quarterback play, but ultimately at the end, just didn't have the speed to match up with a guy like that. And to me, he's an NFL player. He's a little bit undersized as well, but I think he's an NFL wide receiver
who caught 104 passes this year.
He's incredible.
My goodness.
To me, he's right there with David Bell. And those, I mean, I know Iowa fans feel like David Bell is the best of the best because of what he's done against Iowa, but he is right there with David Bell. And that's why I certainly was fearful of what he could do. And unfortunately, the game, bore that out. But I will say Will Levis, Iowa kept him in check pretty well for the most part, but I still like Will Levis. I think he's a really talented guy. And I didn't realize that he was actually, the ABC commentators were talking about him being in draft consideration. So again, shout out to him. He played great. And, it is what it is. You move on, and we'll have a lot of time to talk about next season, Mark.
Right, folks. I doubt this, but if any of you Iowa fans have any more interest in Kentucky, we did record a segment with our Kentucky guy this week, or just today, that will be released on the Voice of College Football SEC. All right, I am off to talk Nebraska football at 7 Eastern and 6 Central on the Nebraska channel. Want to encourage everyone once again to head on over to From the Hawkeye of the Storm and check out Corey's work with Gary Close on the basketball side of things as well. All right, Corey, it's been fun.
We'll talk to you next week, Mark. Thanks.
Sounds good. We'll see you all later.